Bison. Picture 1,000 kilograms of muscle standing perfectly still in a frozen field. No fear, no hurry, just pure, ancient power. That's the American bison, and it has been ruling the plains of North America since long before anyone was around to admire it. Look past the size for a second and you'll notice something strange. A massive hump rising over its shoulders. It's not just for show. That hump is a wall of muscle, built for one brutal job, swinging its skull like a battering ram through solid snowbanks just to reach a few mouthfuls of grass. When the plains freeze over and food disappears under a foot of white, that hump is the difference between life and starvation. Bison call the open grasslands and river valleys home, and their routine looks almost peaceful. Graze, rest, move with the herd, repeat. But peaceful is the wrong word for a life spent surviving scorching summers, killer cold snaps, and storms that show up with zero warning. Here's the twist nobody expects. This thick-coated giant, buried under snow while it eats, can suddenly explode into a sprint faster than any human could ever hope to outrun. So if you ever meet one in the wild, admire it. From very far away. Every spring, rust-colored calves hit the ground running, sticking close to their mothers because wolves are always watching, and the cold shows no mercy to the weak. And here's the part that should genuinely shock you. Bison almost didn't make it into this century at all. Tens of millions were slaughtered down to a mere few hundred animals. A heartbeat away from extinction. Conservation clawed them back from the edge, and today they walk protected land once again. Massive, unbothered, and impossible to ignore. Gaur. If the bison rules North America, one animal owns Asia completely, and it makes the bison look small. Meet the gaur, the single largest wild cattle species alive on this planet. Found deep in the forests of India and Southeast Asia. A fully grown bull gaur looks less like an animal and more like something built in a lab to test the limits of muscle. Some bulls tip the scales at over a ton, wrapped in a dark coat, pale, stocking legs, and horns that sweep out like nature's own crown. Here's what surprises almost everyone who studies them. For something this powerful, the gaur is remarkably calm. No chip on its shoulder. No need to prove anything. It spends its days quietly working through grass, leaves, and fallen fruit inside dense bamboo forest. Family units are run by experienced females, with calves tucked safely into the center of the herd, surrounded on every side by adults who are not interested in negotiating with predators. Tigers might test a weak or young gaur, but a healthy adult is a wall of muscle no predator wants to gamble against. The real threat isn't claws and teeth. It's disappearing forest and disease spreading in for domestic cattle. Quiet, colossal, and built like a living tank, the gaur is the undisputed heavyweight of Asia's forests. Bell, before we go further, if these giants are blowing your mind, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your favorite so far. We've still got 6 more monsters to cover. Wild yak. Now we're climbing, way up, into thin air, brutal cold, and a landscape that stretches on forever with almost nothing alive in sight. The Tibetan Plateau. Most creatures wouldn't last a week up here. The wild yak doesn't just survive it. It looks completely at home. At first glance, it looks like a relic from another era. Fur hanging almost to the ground, built to block out wind that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. Underneath all that hair sits a massive chest and oversized lungs, engineered specifically to pull oxygen out of air that's barely there. Days are spent grinding through tough mountain grass and crossing open plains that seem to have no end. Females and calves stick together in herds, while older bulls often peel off to live alone. And for an animal built like a small mountain, the wild yak moves across brutal, rocky terrain with almost eerie confidence. But even mastery of this environment has limits. Snowstorms can bury every scrap of food overnight, and hunting has hit their numbers hard in certain regions. Strong, patient, built for altitude that would kill most things. The wild yak is the undisputed master of the roof of the world. Muskox. This next one looks like it walked straight out of the Ice Age, because in a very real sense, it did. The musk ox has been surviving in the Arctic for thousands upon thousands of years, in conditions that would end most large mammals in a single winter. Long outer hair drags almost to the ground, but the real secret weapon is hidden underneath. A dense undercoat called kiviot, considered one of the warmest natural fibers on Earth. Life here means permanent winter, long, dark, and merciless. And the musk ox survives by digging through snow for grasses, moss, and whatever small plants it can find buried beneath the frost. But the moment that truly defines this animal is what happens when wolves show up. There's no scattering, no panic. The herd locks into a tight circle, horns facing outward like a fortress wall, calves hidden safely inside. It's a defense strategy that has worked for thousands of years and counting. Ancient, cooperative, nearly unbreakable. The musk ox proves that sometimes the smartest move in nature is refusing to run. Bell, if you're still with us, this is the halfway point. Smash that like button and subscribe now, because the next 2 animals include one of the most feared creatures in Africa. Cape buffalo. There's one animal in Africa that even lions think twice about, and it isn't the one you'd expect. The Cape buffalo looks, at first, like just another grazer moving across the savannah. That impression dies the second you spot the boss. A thick, fused shield of horn armor across its forehead, built like a natural helmet designed for war. Heavy, muscular, notoriously stubborn. Cape buffalo roam African grasslands, wetlands, and woodlands, usually staying close to water, moving in large herds through their daily routine of grazing and resting. Here's what actually makes them terrifying to predators. Loyalty. If one buffalo is attacked, the herd doesn't run. It turns around and charges straight back in a danger to save it. For a hunting lion, That single decision can turn a routine hunt into a fatal mistake. Drought, disease, and predators never stop testing them. But Cape buffalo remain one of the toughest, most defiant animals walking the African continent. Wild water buffalo. Now imagine taking a bull and dropping it straight into a swamp. That's essentially the wild water buffalo. This massive animal rules the wetlands of South and Southeast Asia, carrying horns that can stretch over 2 meters from tip to tip. But for something this intimidating, its entire day often revolves around one simple pleasure: mud. Wild water buffalo live for wallowing in marsh and pond, using the mud as natural sunscreen and insect repellent rolled into one. They graze on grasses and aquatic plants, and in the water, this lumbering giant transforms into a surprisingly graceful swimmer. Sadly, true wild populations are vanishing fast as wetlands are drained and wild buffalo interbreed with domestic herds. Enormous, unhurried, and completely at home buried in mud, the wild water buffalo remains one of Asia's most underrated giants. Bell, 2 more left, and one of them is the smallest wild cattle species on the planet. Like this video now, so it reaches more people who need to see this. Banteng. Not every giant needs to look brutal. Some look almost elegant, and the Banteng proves it. Sleek body, rich, deep coat, bright white stockings running down each leg. At a glance, this animal looks almost too polished to survive in the wild. But underneath that graceful exterior is a tough, adaptable survivor built for the forests and open woodlands of Southeast Asia. Banteng feed on grass, shoots, and fallen fruit, often becoming most active as the heat of the day fades. Females and young stay together in groups, while mature, males frequently wander off alone. Despite looking almost delicate next to bulkier cattle species, Banteng are far hardier than they appear, though hunting and habitat loss have hit their numbers hard. Graceful, alert, quietly resilient. The Banteng is proof that raw strength doesn't always need to look intimidating. Anoa. And finally, the smallest member of the entire wild cattle family, and one of the strangest. Meet the Anoa, often nicknamed the dwarf buffalo. Picture a full-size buffalo, then shrink it down dramatically. That's essentially what you're looking at. And being small is exactly what keeps it alive. The Anoa exists only on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, buried deep inside dense rainforest. Its compact frame lets it slip through thick vegetation with an ease larger cattle could never manage. Unlike almost every other species on this list, Anoa live mostly solitary lives, quietly feeding on leaves, fruit, and ferns while avoiding attention at all costs. They're so secretive that people living just meters from their territory may never once lay eyes on one. Habitat loss and hunting have made them increasingly rare, small, secretive, and unlike anything else on Earth. 8 animals. 8 completely different survival strategies. From frozen tundra to steaming rainforest, the wild cattle family has conquered nearly every brutal environment this planet has to offer. If this journey through nature's toughest giants captivated you, don't scroll away yet. Smash that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and share this with someone who needs to see just how wild this world really is. More untamed stories are coming.